So what we're going to do is move on with the actual painting. For this one, I'm going to be using Tamiya paints. So for the underside, which we're going to be starting in a moment, it's XF21. Then obviously we're going to be using dark slate grey and dark sea grey as well for the two grey colours, as well as yellow. Now the thing is, what I'm going to try and do is make this as simple and as easy as possible. So as I sort of come across problems and things like that, which I think are sort of valuable lessons for you, I'll shout them out. So, plan of action, obviously make sure you've got the place covered down, make sure you're dust free, everything else like that. Give your model a good wipe over first. If you've got some tacky cloths, things like that, they're great, but really you've got to make sure there's nothing in the panel lines, because obviously if you've got anything in the panel lines like dust, it will come out, and that's when you get speckly surfaces and everything else like that. Now I'm going to assume you've got some basic knowledge of airbrushing, okay? This isn't sort of your first time with it, but I'll talk you through any problems I've got. Now my airbrush has been sat around all weekend, and to be honest, the needle is now jammed in the end, and I've got a little bit of play where it's not moving. So all I do, take the front and the back off, so you've got the little air cap and the front end prong system. Loosen off the collet at the back, okay, and we give it a tap until it all pulls through. And usually what it is a little bit of paint build up on the needle, which I can feel, to be honest, so I know that's what it is. As I say, you can use airbrush, thinners, cleaner, anything else you like. Personally, I'm just going to use a tiny bit of cellulose thinners on a cloth. Okay, and then wiping always away from you. Don't pull it towards you, otherwise you might bend the needle. We're just going to clean that needle up. And then we can just spin it as we're wiping away. And you'll notice all the nasties and everything go onto your towel. Okay, and that's usually what it is. It's actually just a biting thing where the actual, somewhere inside, it's actually just dried and clogged on a little bit. So all I'm going to do is pop that in the back and then slip the needle back in. Okay, then what we do, take a little bit of thinners into the air cap. Okay, and because we've got the blowback, it means the end's not on tight enough. So what we just need to do is just release the trigger, and you should notice it all gets moist and flicks around and everywhere else like that, and your trigger should be nice and springy. So what we do, we just set the thing, tap on the needle on the back to make sure it's all in, and it should be very springy, both up and down and back and forth, okay? If you can hear any hissing or funny noises or bubbles coming at your colour cut, it's always the front end, it's just got air coming in through the front, okay? So all you need to do is tighten up the front. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to spray for the moment. As we can see, the model is now covered in acrylic thinners. So if we just grab a paper towel, see, I said I'd point them out as we go. Okay, so we just give them a wipe over. Acrylic thinners on its own won't hurt plastic, so don't worry about wiping it off. Quick tip, if you ever get thinners all over your plane when you painted it, just don't touch it, just leave it and let it dry naturally. Okay, so we're on like that. So what we need to do now is paint the cockpit area with black paint. The reason for doing that is so from the inside the framing looks black. Also, the other thing it'll do is it'll give that, it'll stop the canopy frames looking a little bit opaque, a little bit transparent. So what we're going to do, we just pop some neat paint. Now the reason for spraying it neat is so it's nice and thick, goes on, sticks, dries almost instantly and everything else like that. So we just literally, doesn't have to be too neat, although we don't want runs. Just doing all the canopy framing and everywhere like that. At the same time, what you can do is just go off and do any panel lines you're a little concerned about, okay? So if you've got a panel line you're thinking, oh, I'm not too happy about that, that looks a little bit off or a little bit nasty, spray them with some black paint. You can see how much is showing through and everything else like that. And that way it'll just take care of it quite nicely. So we're just going to do under there, and I want to do a little bit just around here, just to know if that's all lying okay. And then just a tiny bit down below. Okay, and they're all good. Just down the spine. And because it's flat paint, you can just dry very, very quickly, and you can just have a look to see if there's any nasty marks, if you've still got some seam lines in or anything else like that. That's purely all I'm doing that for. So we just pop the old paint back in the colour cup. Okay, so at this point, if you did notice that it's perhaps got a blemish, a seam line still showing through, you can sand it, polish it, fill it, whatever you have to do to take care of it. And then that way, you know, you're back to square one, back with the primer, and away we go with it. But I'm quite happy how that one is. So what we're going to do now, we just do a very quick colour change. So for that, what we do is clean out the airbrush as best as possible. Okay, a bit of thinners in the colour cup. And we take my brush. This is one I use for mixing and cleaning and anything in the airbrush. Okay, tiny bit on the front end. Then all we do is blow this all out. Through. Okay, so now obviously this primer's out there. You can go and buy a primer. Anybody's primer will do. Anything else. Personally, I just tend to use what I've got a lot of. Okay, I've said this before. So what we're going to do, I seem to have a load of the REF light grey colour. Just give this a bit of a mix. Get the top off. Okay, now I haven't got gallons of this. So what I'm going to do, literally, I'm just making a simple 50-50 mix. So I'm just putting thinners directly in because I've only got a little bit left in the bottom. So about 50% of each. And we're just going to grab our brush and we're just going to give this a mix in the pot. Now technically this is a little bit naughty because you can't see what's going on and lumps and everything else like that. But I do use my paint a lot, so it's not standing around, so I know it's not really lumpy and horrible and everything else like that. So there's a little bit of trust involved. Okay, so we just clean the brush off. So we'll just tip this into here. Okay, that's fine. So we just check our flow just down here, making sure it's all coming through nicely. Then what we'll do, we'll just start on the bottom. We're literally just doing a light coat of paint everywhere. Now these nav lights at the bottom, don't worry about that, we'll clean them up afterwards. As I say, it's only a primer, so it doesn't have to be too particularly nice this, but we do want it to be nice and smooth, because obviously it's the base for our paint going on in a moment. So just make sure you get in absolutely everywhere. So I'm spraying this at around about sort of 25 psi. It's quite strong, but it doesn't have to be fancy, so we're not worried about that. Okay, so that's our first bit of paint used up. We'll just hold that like that. Okay, if it's looking a little bit wet anywhere, just dry it down. Don't forget, you can always sand back at this point if you over wet it or something. Make sure you do your leading edges, tails. Now I'm going to hold this by its rudder and spray that in a moment when we're all dried off and everything. So what we're going to do is cut to air, a little bit more on the side there, just cutting to air now and drying off. Just a little bit more, just finish up that cut. So we're literally just drying down, just air. So we'll be able to put it down. Okay, we can pop that down, so we just pop that there, just a quick refill. Okay, so we can do the guns. I'll hold them by the tops. But when you're priming, you're trying to look for any blemishes or problems, or perhaps you've missed a bit or something, because this is your last chance really before the paint goes on. As soon as we've got paint going on, we don't want to be fixing problems. Okay. So we just stand him up like that and just do this other one. Okay, same on spinners. Just like so, we've got a bit of sponge. Stick them on just on the wheels, prime them up as well. Priming also just makes everything so much easier because the paint, the next coat of paint and everything else like that will just simply stick to it, and that is perfect. That's what we want. Okay, so we just got this area around the back here, so I'm hoping now we should be able to touch the front and dry. Literally passing in. And there we go, that can sit back down. Okay, we're literally going to leave that just for sort of 5 minutes just to go off, and then we can get in there with some pre-shading. Okay, so it's been drying for about half an hour. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a bit of thinners, probably 1 ml of thinners, 1 ml of black paint, okay, into the old colour cup. Now this is really for pre-shading. Now the secret of pre-shading is to make it as random as you possibly can. As soon as you start making it a little bit too precise, it does tend to be a bit of a problem then, because what can happen is it just looks a little bit too much like a grid, things like that. So don't worry if you're spraying in small little things isn't exactly brilliant. I wouldn't worry about it because that will really help. So what we're going to do, we just move you in a little bit. We're just going to work on this wing area here. Now I'm doing this a bit away from me. So what we're going to do, as you can probably see, you've got panel lines on it. Okay. Now the thing with these panel lines, what we want to do is basically just follow them around with the airbrush. So we got quite a mix here. So all we're doing is just going around like this. So we're deliberately making it a bit messy. Also it shows how it doesn't have to be perfect to get the effect that we're after. Okay. So if you make it sort of like this, say it's a little bit messy, things like that, then you're okay. What you can do is anywhere that's got little panels, you can put in some dots on top of the access panels, and it will make them look a little bit more grimy when you come to put your top coat on. So there we go. We're just going to go around the entire thing and making it look like that. So exactly the same with the aircraft itself. So all you do is literally go around, okay, and follow all the panel lines. Say the big ones get big paint, the little ones not so much. So say 50-50 mix, probably about 25 psi. When your airbrush starts, just come away, pull the trigger all the way back, and you can start again. So we just do these panel lines along the belly. So it'll be easier to do them now than in a minute. Okay, and we're just following these in. Along here. Around here, pick out some panels, same as we did the other one. And there we go, just like so. So you're just going to go around and follow all the panel lines. Now you don't have to do all the panel lines, and say don't worry if it's a bit of a mess because you can really easily cover this up. But we can do on the top as well. We're just literally going to work our way around them all. So what we'll do, we'll just pop something underneath the back end just to hold it up a little. Let it swing it around. Just going to do a little bit on this edge as well, because obviously we've got the wing fold, so I want it to look slightly grimy. So we'll just pop this in here. So we're just going to pop it all the way around. So this is pre-shading. Now the thing is, post-shading is when you go around and do this afterwards. If you're doing a one-stage colour, such as things like greys, modern aircraft, things like that, you really only need to do pre-shading, okay? And that way you get a little bit more chance, because say if it does go wrong, you can just spray it over it and get rid of the entire thing. If it is looking like, you know, you've overdone it and gone too heavy, then obviously you can go back at this stage and re-prime and have another go at it. But really, I wouldn't worry about being too heavy, because it's always something that we can fix. So I'm going to go around now and finish the rest of this all off. Okay, so now we can get on with the main painting. So for that, we're going to be using basically Tamiya colours for all of this. XF21 50-50 mix with obviously paint to thinners, shooting at around about 25 psi. So when you're airbrushing, always start with the lightest colour first. Thinners in first. Okay, we're not going to need tons of this. Paint. Okay, by putting the thinners in first, what that actually does is, brush here. What that actually does, it stops the paint from clogging up down in the bottom of the colour cup down by the needle. So the thinner's in there first, so it just gets everything moving quicker. Okay, but basically start with the lightest colour first and work your way through darker, because obviously it's a lot easier to cover dark light paint than it is colouring dark. So if you were to do it last, you'd need lots and lots of coats to go ahead. Now it's pretty straightforward on this one. It's all going to be on the undersides. So literally spraying light passes over the thing. Okay, and stop. Then what you'll notice is, as it dries, the pre-shading that we've just put on comes back. You can probably see a little bit of it there, and actually as we speak, you can see it literally coming back to life. So it gives you that type of shadow. Then when you come back with a wash and things like that, what will happen is, it will make the actual areas really stand out, and it sort of gives it that nice of the panel line's quite sharp and then it fades into grime, and that's what we're type of after. So basically when you're happy like that, and obviously we've got the grime showing through, we'll stop. Exactly the same on the other wing. Obviously on this particular one, because we're doing it as a trainer aircraft, all the extremities are yellow, so hence while they're not on, because obviously we'll paint them as a separate, but if you wanted to do them now, by all means you can. So what we're doing is literally going up higher on the parts, okay? So by higher, I mean I'm wrapping it around to the top half a little bit so it all joins in. But you see, this one here, we had some darker areas, so I just went over them a little bit more heavier to blend them through. But if I show you both parts together, as you can see here, well, hopefully you can see, this one here on this side is a lot darker than the other one, and that's just as it's drying through, okay? And it will dry through just like that. There's a little technique we'll do in a moment, which is basically we lighten everything up just a bit to give it a little bit of change in tone. Okay, so we'll start on the underside of the Spitfire as well. So we're doing wheel wells, everything else goes in with it. Obviously this bottom cowl needs to be done. Those engines down in the intakes, we'll take care of those afterwards. I say, don't worry too much if you suddenly lose all your pre-shading. The back end is this, it's right, tip of the rudder. Okay, just the back area. Make sure we're all in. And there we go, that shows that underneath. So I say we've gone up, but not too much over, because obviously we don't want to lose the pre-shading, but make sure you go right up to just past the actual line you want to do. Otherwise what will happen is you'll get like a shaded area rather than a full area. So that's those done. So at the same time as doing the fuselage, obviously we're going to do the tailplanes, might help. Almost forgot them. There we go, make sure you do the leading edges. Okay, so that's that done. Same time, going to do the spinner. Make sure you're coming from the front. Same again, that got a little bit of pre-shading, just wanted to break it up a little bit. Just in like that. And then obviously make sure you do the gear doors. So I've still got them on the sprue, to be honest, just because it's easier to spray them on and then take care of them afterwards. So we're going to do those, and then obviously we can do the actual the gear, the tail wheel area, everything else like that. So I just thought it would be easier to spray the main parts on the sprue. So we've just done that one like that. Happy with that one is. Poke that one out of the way. As I say, same thing again with the tail wheel. Give it a complete spray over, because that way we can go around and touch it in afterwards. Whoops. And then we can do the same as well for the rear doors, if we can see them. They're on here somewhere. I'm sure they are. I've seen it. Okay, that takes care of those. Okay, so have a look around it now and see if you're happy. Now make sure, like in the middle here, you might see a little dark spot. That's just pre-shading coming through, a little bit stronger than the rest. So we just overcoat that area. And you might see now, we can see the grime actually on these. Basically, if you think it's too strong and too much, just give it another coat of paint and cover it down a little bit. Perhaps a little bit at the top here on the tape pack. So just give us another light dust over there. This little bit's got a little bit too much there, I'll take care of that. But say we're going to lighten up in a moment and take care of a few of the little patchy areas as well. What we'll do, we'll just wait 10 minutes, let it totally dry off, come back, lighten up some of the paint and give it a little bit of sort of break up the paintwork with some lighter shading. Okay, so that's basically just dried off now, quite happy. Okay, so what we've got here, we've still got some of the colour in the colour cup. So what we're going to do is pour some of that back. Okay, we've still got a little bit left in here. I'll just catch that as it runs down the side. Okay, so what we're going to do is basically lighten that up. So we're just going to take some flat white, give it a good old shake, mix that up. Taking a little bit of white, okay, we're just going to add it to our colour in there. And then what we're going to do is double thin what we've got in there. So whatever you've got in there, just make another 50-50 mix. So it's wetter than lighter. Okay, good old mixing in the colour cup. Now the great thing about making it thinner is that you can't really make a mistake at this point, because you'll need to build up the layers. What you want to do is blow it all through first, so you've got the nice lighter shade coming through. Okay, and then what we'll do, we'll start on this wing. All we're going to do now with this lighter colour is just generally spray in between some of the panels, okay? So what we're going to do is just going to pick out little areas. I'm just going to spray off the centre of the panel, okay? So we're not trying to go in here and literally, you can see the shiny spots, they'll dry down, but we're not trying to colour in, we just stop. And once we've done around, and you can see it dry down, all we do is just give it a couple of light passes right the way over. And all this is going to do is slightly break up the paintwork to make it a little bit more realistic. It's a real simple technique, and because it's very thin paint, you have to do quite a few layers. But as we dry it down, you can probably see you get that sort of nice, more worn look to your paintwork. Every now and again, make sure you don't get any build up on the end of your nozzle, so we just clean that away, otherwise that can cause spitting. Okay, underneath exactly the same thing. We're just going to pop a little bit on the bottom of this cowl, a little bit here and there. As I say, because we don't want to lose our pre-shading and things under coats of paint. We're just literally just trying to break it all up and make the paintwork just look a lot more tonal, if you like. You just change the tone slightly and you'll be amazed at the effects you can get with it. And it makes big blocky aircraft stops them looking like bricks, you know, it just breaks up that paintwork a little. Okay, a slight bit in here, but I'm not worried about that. But being cheap and tight, I'm going to save my paintwork. Pop it in there, give it a mix, nobody will ever know. Okay, make sure our lids are on. So what we want to do now is literally let this completely dry off, okay, and go off, he says, trying to get the yellow top on. Okay, in the meantime, what we can do is use this yellow, okay, and do the yellow area. So what we're going to do is going to move those out of the way. Okay, so we've got these yellow areas to do, so we can use some clamps on these. These were pre-shaded, exactly the same as everything else. The only difference is these weren't primed, but they had a nice rub down instead. So what we'll do, quick colour change. I'll show you again, literally all I do, blow out what's in there completely. Come along with some thinners in the colour cup. Just a mil of thinners, give it a rinse in there. Be careful you don't flick this all over your model, because I've done that too many times in the past. Okay, down in the front, little brush around the front end as well, that always helps. And then what we're going to do is blow this through. Okay, get rid of all of that. Okay, and there you go. You can probably see clean colour cup ready to go. And I say, it won't hurt having a tiny bit of grimy yellow in this. Now this is an old yellow, if I'm honest. It's quite nasty probably in here. So what we'll do, we'll just give this a bit of a mix round. As I don't use yellow, as you can imagine, very often in much of my building. It's usually used for hand painting, not spraying. So we just give that a good old mix in there. And what we do, same as we did before, but only not going to need much at all. Thinners in first. Then our paint goes in. Okay, I'm going to have to put a little bit more in, because I put too much thinners in, if I'm honest. So we're going to have to build this up. Okay, taking your time, if you've just done what I've done, put too much in. Check our flow, no problem at all. And then literally just over, we go over. Okay. Okay, cutting to air, so just no paint, not pulling back, just pushing down. And we're going to dry it off. The thing about drying it off, it just stops it building up, and as you can see, we've got massive amounts of pre-shading showing through. So it's going to take a few coats to get rid of these, and if you make it too wet, you're going to end up with runs and horrible things. So by literally cutting to air on every pass, you will limit the number of times you're going to need to go around this. But pre-shading on the yellow is quite important, because we want this aircraft to look like it has been in training. But obviously, if you've got, normally you'd be doing multiple pieces, but literally with every pass you'll knock it down a touch, okay, until you're in the position where you can stop, okay, and move on. But it's just to help as that other one's drying off. Back again, I reckon another 2 or 3 coats on this and we'll be done. So I'll carry on with this, and then we can get on with the camo work. Okay, so what we've done, we've masked up the undersides, okay, basic job, just a little bit of masking tape all around those areas. To be honest, I used a bit of 10mm Tamiya tape, right the way around, everywhere like that. We've put a little bit on the sides of the scoops, just in case we get overspray coming down, but I'm not going to mask up the entire thing, so we're going to be shooting down, so it gives us nice lines and things like that. Now, the colours that I'm going to call out for this one, basically you've got, it looks like on the instructions it's brown and green, although really it's not. Let me show you. You see this, it looks brown and green. It's the temperate sea scheme from the Second World War. So what it is, it's basically 2 types of grey, as it calls it, although the second grey is more like a green. So it's like a deep slate grey. So I'm substituting in using, obviously, the Humbrol colours for this one, which is XF24. Now, this is dark grey, which is pretty close to gunship grey if you do a lot of US military aircraft, you'll understand it. But what we're going to do, we're going to lighten it up anyway, so it'll make it a little bit more. But we're going to shoot it as is just for the minute. So, same as we did before on the load, we're just going to put a bit in. Now, we're not going to need gallons of this because of our sorry, a little bit of rain coming in, because of, obviously we're only doing the camo pattern. We're not going to spray the entire aircraft. Now you could always do that. You could spray the entire aircraft. We're just checking our needle and our flow. Good. You could go around and spray the entire thing, but what I'm going to do is follow the camo pattern. So just out of sight, just down here, we can show you. I've got the instructions, so I can follow them as I go around the full spray job, okay? But just if you sort of orientate it the same way as your aircraft is, you'll find it a lot easier. So here we go then. So all we're going to do, we'll start at the top of the tail, and we're roughly going to follow the camo pattern as it is. A little bit too wet mix this one, so I'm going to turn the air pressure down just a touch. Here we go, so we just turn the air pressure down. We're about sort of 15 psi, it's just purely because it's quite a wet mix and it's starting to blow everywhere. So what we're going to do is follow as the instructions have it, quite loosely. Okay, I'm following in. So this grey is going to come down like this, then it sort of comes up over the tail, just like so, and then obviously we've got another one that's going to come down from the main cockpit type area. Okay, that's going to come up over, so remember to do your frame bars as well. And it comes right the way at the front, it's going to sweep down through the nose area. So it's just going to go around like this. Okay, now remember, don't go too overboard, because hopefully you can get a little bit of this pre-shading to show through. If it doesn't, don't worry about it, because we're going to be coming back and doing it separately. Okay, round like that. We've got a little bit on the nose area to go round, but I'm actually holding that. So what we'll do is we're just going to turn this around, okay? And obviously you can do it on the bottom like this as well, and we can hold it. So what we're going to do now is just orientate it. We've got a bit around obviously the entire of this engine cowl area. So we'll do that, and then it sort of sweeps in. So don't worry about being too precise, because we are going to completely redo this area anyway. So it's more of an overall colouring effect that we're doing rather than trying to be precise here at the moment. And this one then comes in here and sweeps down the back. So as I say, just try and do it so you completely overlap. There's nothing worse when you find you put the camo on and you've got like a light area, shall we say, or something like that. So this one here goes through the centre of the tail. Okay, sweeps down onto the back one, and then we can obviously come up and mix just like so. So making sure we've done all that framing around the canopy, everywhere else like that. So now we can look down and see how it's going to sweep from the top area. So obviously it just comes down, as I say, it's just going to literally fall off of this wing. Now we've got a little bit obviously where it's going to come in from this side with the actual camo work. And then the same on the other side, all this leading edge. Okay, now when you're doing the fronts of the actual the wings at them, I sort of come in from about sort of 45 degrees to the front and just blow down, and that should give you a nice edge on there, sort of like this, without having to sort of rush around doing the masking and everything else like that. Okay, so that's that, and then obviously we've just got these tail planes at the back. So we just make sure the tape, masking tape is off of them, just where I've held it. Okay, and then with this down here, these are just going to be straightforward on this side. Just like this one, and this one is the opposite effect. So it's more on the outside. Okay, so we've just got this area just round here at the front to do. And there we go, that's it. So what we're going to do now is put, same as we did before, we're going to pour a little bit of this back. Okay, we're just going to grab quite a bit of thinners, double it up on thinners again. Then we're going to take a little bit of white, add that into the mix, so it's a nice lighter shade, and do exactly we did with the underside. We're just going to go around centres of panels now. Blow that through, got the light stuff coming in. Okay, we're just going to literally centres of panels, spines, things like that. Just to break up the grey just a little bit. Just like we did before. Same as we did before, just a little light spray right the way over. It's quite thin, so you're not going to colour too much. And that'll just keep it all nicely blended, just like that. So I'm going to do exactly the same for these outer wings as we've just done there, following the paint guide just like that. Then we can get on with the actual camo colour. Right then, so next is getting on with the camo work. Now the easiest way I can do camo is literally by using worm technique, okay? All that is this stuff. Now you want to get the oil-free version. This is called white tack, multiple colours purely because it's got new and old mixed together. In a nutshell, easiest thing to do, we all remember Play-Doh as kids, just roll it up, get it warm, it'll get nice and tacky then and stick to your model. And then what you can do, you put it into little worms, okay, and then literally you can just go along, place them on where you want it to be as a worm, okay, and then literally just go right the way around your model and just keep pushing gently, don't flatten it down, but you know, and then obviously following how it is on your plans, okay, and you can literally go round and do your model just like so. It doesn't look very good, but trust me, by the time we get some paint on it, everything else. Now I know a lot of people do the entire thing in one, they'll mask it up all nicely, but I must admit I do tend to do it as I go along. So for this particular ones, we're going to be using extra acrylics. We've got the RF Dark Slate Grey. This is the XA25. Okay, now the thing is, you can't make this up through Tamiya colours. That is the only trouble. They don't actually do this one. There's lots of formulas for doing it, but since I've got the actual right thing, I thought I'd do it with that one. Now, the only thing with using this worm technique, if your paintwork is a little wet, shall we say, then what can happen is it can actually get underneath and cause all sorts of problems. This way, it will give us a nice feathered edge. If we blow it on quite a strong air pressure, and spraying it on neat. Now I know a lot of you think you can't spray neat. Trust me, you turn the air pressure up, you can spray anything neat. Okay, so what we're going to do is just start down the back and just very, very light pass over the area. That's what I'll do, I'll show you an area to see. As I say, just keep it nice light. Now because this is a gloss paint, it actually doesn't mind being sprayed sort of neat, unthinned, but the only thing you have to do is just build it up very lightly in gentle coats. Okay, so we just do that on this other half. And just sort of try and come in 90 degrees to your paint angle. So that way it gives a nice representation on your model. So okay, I'm quite happy with that. Just going over it again. Now normally what we do is go around a little bit of lighter paint and shade it through and everything else like that, but quite frankly I'm itching to show you. So what I'm going to do now is break one of my own golden rules and unmask this before it's dry. So I'm just drying it off a little bit with air. Okay, and we can show you what we've got. So if I peel this little guy off very carefully, there we go. You can see you get your camo patterns all done very easily. So I say normally you wait until you're all done, but I can show you like this, hopefully without making too much of a hash. Now if you get any little white marks, don't worry about them, we can take care of them afterwards. But there we go, you can probably see just like that it's actually quite a nice finish to it. It's not hard edge like you get if you'd use masking tape, but it's not soft either like obviously you've done it freehand. It is somewhere in between the middle, and it just gives a very nice area. So when you see it unmasked underneath like that, that gives us our type of thing, and it's the right type of grey as well. We can change it slightly, say a little bit of post shading afterwards if you wanted to, but that is basically the technique for doing it. Once you've got your little thing and you're happy, just get this stuff, roll it up into a ball, get it nice and hot, okay, and you should be able to keep using it. The actual, because you're using acrylic paint, it dries incredibly quickly and it's absorbed by the tape itself, which is just one of those nice things. So what I'm going to do is carry on around the entire model, basically just doing exactly the same thing as I've done there, everywhere around it. As soon as we finish, then we can show you a little bit more about the weathering. Okay, so the camo work is all done. We've actually gone round, tidied up a few little areas, but as you can see, it gives a great effect. As we were saying, it's not too sharp a line, and obviously it's not too soft. On this type of scale, if you're trying to do it freehand, you really need to know a lot about it, a lot of practice, a lot of different air pressures, things like that. For a straightforward 148 camo, I think it's pretty hard to beat using the old worm technique. Anyway, you probably see we've got the red now. Now the red is basically, you know, so the crews can tell if the wings are locked down and properly, if you can see red, and also it stops you walking into it on the carrier deck. So we've done those exactly the same on the wings and on the ends as well, and we've also done the end of the actual wing tips themselves, so when they're all showing up, so you can see all those red areas. So that's really the end of the painting stage. Obviously we're going to do post shading and things like that, but what I like to do is get the decals on. Once the decals are on, we can actually get a weathering wash onto it, a little bit of post shading, so all the decals blend in and are toned down as well to the same state of the aircraft. If you do the washes first and some of the post shading first, then you put the decals on, obviously the decals look like, you know, brand new shiny stickers stuck on it, and that's obviously not what we're after. Because we've used flat paint on this, what I want to do is now give it a gloss coat. Now the idea of the gloss coat is it's a nice slippery shiny surface, so when the decals go on, the air can't get trapped underneath of it and comes out. Now lots of different ways of using it. Obviously you could use a purpose-built gloss for it. Cheap alternative is something like this, or like this. This is Johnson's floor cleaner. It's about $3.50, and obviously you get here half a litre, which is obviously $3.50 versus something like you pay £2 for a small 10ml bottle. So obviously it's just a cheap way. There is the old and the new. Basic difference is the new one is a little bit thinner. It's milky in colour, okay, but does dry totally clear. Now I've done this in testing on clear parts, and we've stuck it in the sun and everything else like that. That's really the only difference. So don't panic if you can't find the old type, which is the clear gloss. You can use the new, and obviously what we do, we use the new for this one. So all we're going to do is literally take it. Smells very nice, the new one compared to the old one. We're just going to pop it neat straight into the colour cut. And you can probably see it in there. It's just a little bit of a milky colour versus the normal standard. So we'll just check our flow. Okay, then we'll find somewhere to hold this. So we'll hold this by the tail. Okay, so all we're going to do is literally run everywhere around it. Nice light coat. And what it'll do, it'll just blend everything in. Obviously it all goes a little bit darker, but don't worry about that too much, because it will all come good in the end. Okay, what it does, it just gives it a nice shiny coat. Obviously also it will stop things chipping, getting stuck in, but as you can see it goes on totally clear, no problem. Cut into air just to dry it down a little bit. And just for argument's sake, what we'll do is we're just going to pop it over here on top of something so it's very little is touching. Okay, exactly the same on the wings. It's nothing neat or precise, but so it just makes it all stand up and become a bit easier. So if we just grab a paint pot, we can stand it on its edge. Okay, I'm not going to do any of the other areas, but we will do the spinner. Just like that, but I'm not going to do the yellows because the yellows I want them to grime up, so by leaving them a little bit flat just saves it. Got a little bit left, but we're not going to worry about that, it's only a tiny bit, so we just tip that way. But as you can see, it does go on clear. Now depending on how rough your paint is will depend on how many coats it needs. Obviously usual cleanup with this, just your normal airbrush cleaner as I do, just a little bit of acrylic thinners. Bit of a mix round, just treat it as you would a normal acrylic paint. Okay, just like that. Let me just blow that out. Okay, this stuff takes not too long to dry. If you're in a nice warm day, it'll probably dry in roughly about sort of 10 minutes, something like that. If you're in cold conditions, give it a couple of hours to really go off. But trust me, this stuff is great, very, very cheap way of glossing and things like that. So we just let that go off and we get on with some decorating.